polluting with fish tanks. Is bigger actually better? Right, today we're going to be getting an honest outlook on the pros and cons of keeping a big tank. So, although having a big tank is the dream, they look amazing, they come with their own unique challenges. Right, so first we need to put a tag on what we're going to class as a big tank. So for the purpose of this video, we'll be talking about tanks that are anything from 5 foot plus in length. That's what we class as a big unit. Anything below your sort of moderate, medium, average sized tanks. So we'll start with the pros, and it's one of the most clear and obvious ones, which is we've got more room for more fish. So we can stock a higher volume of fish with a bigger tank. And not only that, it gives us the ability to choose fish that we wouldn't usually be able to choose as well. So if you've got a bigger tank and you want to start looking at your haps or your iBuyers, which can get to about 30 centimeters in length. If you've got a bigger tank, it gives you the option to get those fish. And it's same with things like, you know, your Oscars, your Geophaguses. They're all really beautiful fish that we want to keep, but you do need to have bigger tanks to keep them. So one of the main pros, one of the biggest ones, what we all want, is we can have more fish and we've got a better choice of what fish we're going to keep. Another big pro for a big tank is all centered around the overall health of the fish. So we get a bigger water volume. So what that means is it's more forgiving to pollutants. So if we're having things going into the tank from the air, whether that be, you know, deodorant or perfume that's been sprayed in the room, whether it be candles being lit, these release pollutants. They can end up in your tank, and if you've got a larger water volume, it's obviously a lot more forgiving because it doesn't get as condensed and it doesn't pollute it as quickly. So it gives you a better chance when you're doing water changes to remove those horrible toxins from the water, and obviously that has a good impact on the fish that you're going to keep. Also as well, with the added water volume, we've got a bigger surface area on the water's surface, and what that does is it gives us more oxygenation of the water. So when the top of your water is moving and you've got a little bit of flow, or your return lines are coming in, your canister filters coming in, and the top of your water is moving, it really helps oxygenate the water, which is also good for your fish as well. So you get a bigger water volume. It's a lot more forgiving to overdosing things or pollutants getting into your tank. And then you've also got that increased surface area on the top of the tank as well, which helps oxygenate the water. My favourite thing, and what gravitates a lot of people to big tanks, is the room that it gives you inside to create a scape. So when I say scaping, what I mean is your rocks, your plants, how you design your tank and how it looks. When you've got more space in the tank, it gives you a lot more freedom to do what you want to do inside it. So you can get those big, beautiful pieces of bogwood in. You can fill it with plants and give it that filled out jungle look. You can create those rock sculptures that you really want to make inside the tank, and it gives it a lot more of a natural feel. You can really get a lot out of big tanks when it comes to scaping. My tank is 6 foot, so it's a relatively big tank, but I've also got it built so that it's 2 foot from front to back. Now, it's not just the length that makes a difference. That depth from front to back is huge. So a lot of default tanks, you made it about 18, 16, 14 inches from front to back. That room that you get there where you're sort of creating that depth in the tank, it makes so much of a difference, and you don't realise how much you miss it until you get a tank that's got that extra bit of depth to it, because it really gives you the ability to make a three-dimensional look, build things up at the back and give it a much better look. So for me, my favourite thing about big tanks is the ability that it gives you to create something beautiful inside. So the next one is visual appeal. So bigger tanks, for me, they have a more appealing look to them. I don't know about anybody else, but I first got into keeping fish. What lit a fire underneath me and really got me going for it was seeing these big tanks in people's houses and seeing the big tanks in the fish stores. When they're done correctly and they fill them with all the planted specimens and they have the coral reefs in there, or they have big African cichlid setups with nice rock work in, it really makes you look at it and think, I want that in my house. My tank is big, and it is too big for this house. I've got a small house and it takes up a lot of space, but it's still a centerpiece to the home. It's still visually appealing and it still looks right and draws attention to it. So for me, and a lot of people, big tanks just have that extra wow factor. They're a lot more appealing, they give it a bit more of a pop, and they're really impressive when you see them done right. Right, so the honeymoon's over. Let's move on to the bit that we don't want to talk about, which is the cons of having a big tank. The first one, and the big one, is maintenance. So maintenance on a big tank can be an absolute headache. If you've watched my maintenance and water change videos earlier on in the channel, you'll see that I need a ladder to get into this tank. So for me to be able to reach down to the bottom, I need to be on a step ladder. Scraping this glass, scraping it all down takes a long time. If you're doing your sand siphoning, you're taking all the crap out of that. There's a lot of space down here that you've got to cover. And then your water changes as well. Although, with your water quality, tends to be better with bigger tanks because it takes a lot longer for waste to build up in them and get to a dangerous level. When you do have to do them, you're taking a bigger water volume out, you're putting a bigger water volume back in, and then your tank's more susceptible to fluctuations in parameters. Yeah, you can argue just get a magnetic glass cleaner. Magnetic cleaners are absolutely, and I've been a victim of this many times, and I'll explain to you why, and I've done it again for some reason. So I bought this. When you use a magnetic cleaner, if you've got a sand substrate in your tank, if you've got big pebbles and planted tank soil and whatnot, you'll be fine. But if you've got sand anywhere in your tank, do not use a magnetic cleaner, because all that happens is you end up getting the substrate stuck in between the magnet, and then when you swipe this across your tank, you scratch it to pieces. So I've got loads of little micro scratches in different places on my tank now from using this one time, and I've never used it again since. So stay away from magnetic cleaners if you've got a sand substrate, and just stick to a blade or a sponge to clean it. It does a better job anyway. The next con is the cost. So these things cost a lot of money in more ways than just one. So not just the actual tank itself. So buying the actual tank, they can be very expensive when you're getting them at bigger sizes. They require thicker pieces of glass, which is where the money comes in. Not just with the tank itself, but with things that are going to go in line with the tank. So things like your filtration. You're going to need bigger, more powerful filtration with better flow rates and things to put on these tanks, and they come at a cost. Also, you have to consider your lighting as well. You're going to need to get new light units, bigger ones that are going to cover the space, the additional space that you've got. Your substrate, we all know how expensive that can be if you're buying it in the fish stores. You'd be surprised how many bags I needed of this sand to fill this tank up. It was a lot. It cost a lot of money. And then your scaping materials as well. So things like your bogwood, your scaping rocks. Yeah, you can go and get some bits out the river here and there, but you want to be careful with stuff like that. It's something I don't advise doing. Support the local fish shop. Go and get your scaping stuff from there and get some at quality. you'll get a better result out of it, but it comes at a cost. And then your electricity bills as well. So you need bigger heaters, bigger pumps, more lights. It all adds up. So they're more costly to run and they're a lot more costly to set up as well. So you really need to set yourself a budget out before you get into big tanks, because it can bleed your wallet dry. The next one, space requirements. So that's another big one. I've got this in a small house. It took a lot of talking around to my missus to be able to get this in here because of the amount of space it takes up. It takes a whole dining room. So we haven't got a table and chairs in here because I wanted the fish tank. But they take up a lot of space. So where you can actually situate these tanks is a big con, because it's not just the size of the tank you've got to take into consideration, it's the weight. So if you're in apartments, if you're on top floors, or you want to put this tank upstairs, or you've got a basement underneath your house, you really need to check that the structure is correct and it's going to hold the weight of the tank. This probably weighs more than a car full of water. So weight considerations is a big one. Make sure you're checking where you're putting this tank and that it can support it before you put it in. Also as well, ideally you do want a spare room, unless you've got a really lenient significant other. You want your own room or garage that you can put this into. So that's a big con to them. Finding space in your house, somewhere that it can live and somewhere that's going to support the weight of the actual tank itself. And then the final one is one that I don't even like thinking about, and that is the risk to your home and your assets. So if you have a failure on a tank like this, if you have a split seam or something hits it and cracks it, the carnage that will unfold at the end of that would be unimaginable. So if something like this were to fail, or you were to have any sort of error on it, you do need some sort of backup or cleanup plan, which I don't have, but it's ideal to get, because if one of these bursts or you have a failure in the tank, it can be catastrophic, not only for your assets, but for the fish. You're going to have more fish in these tanks, you're going to have more livestock, more money invested into it. So if you have a failure, that to me is probably top of the list for cons. Right, so what's the conclusion to this? What's the answer to the question, are bigger tanks better? I think it depends on a variety of things. So it depends on what sort of fish you're planning to keep, the space you've got in your home. Is it really necessary? Is it going to look stupid and silly? For me, bigger tanks are better. I enjoy them more because I have a better choice of what fish I can keep. I can get fish that typically grow a little bit bigger. But if you're into your nano tanks, your shrimp tanks and your nano fish, then a tank this size isn't really gonna be a good choice for you. I think you also need to be aware that there's a lot of commitment that comes into it. So if you've been in the hobby for a long time and you know that it's something that you've really got yourself into, then you know that you're going to commit to the extra maintenance, the glass cleaning, the sand siphoning. So for me, a bigger tank is better because I know I can commit to that and I know what sort of fish I want to keep. But let me know what you think. Do you think bigger tanks are better? Let me know in the comments. If you found the video helpful, don't forget to subscribe.